There really was nothing else quite like Another World, known elsewhere as Out of This World, on the Mega Drive when I first played it shortly after release. Nothing I'd played up to that point had approached its level of cinematic style, and although I'd seen games that looked as technically impressive on my friend's PC, I hadn't thought the Mega Drive was capable of such things. The intro movie is possibly the most striking part of the whole package, and for just about the first time on the Mega Drive, the word movie was not entirely out of place. This was like a cartoon, and a particularly stylish one at that. It's a little primitive, sure, but even today I think it still looks damn good. And that applies to the game as a whole. There's a real artistry on display here, arguably more so than any other Mega Drive game ever produced. The landscapes, once you get into the eponymous Otherworld, are indeed, well, otherworldly, and starkly beautiful. But it's the colour that is the real star here. It honestly seemed to me at the time that this game was producing colours that had not previously been possible on the Mega Drive. The subdued colour palette of blues and greys works so well, but the standout, no doubt, is the main character Lester Chaikin's red hair. It was a stroke of genius to include that vibrant splash of orange. It perfectly offsets every scene that Lester moves through. In terms of gameplay, Another World has perhaps not aged quite so well in this respect as its visual style has. You have quite a limited moveset available to you. You can run, jump and kick, and you have a gun that fires lasers or can be charged up to create a shield, or charged for even longer to generate a massive beam that can destroy doors and some objects, and enemy shields as well. And that's fine, this is not a game that needs a huge range of moves for the player character, it's more about exploration and figuring out how to overcome various obstacles. So the movement is not a big factor, but the controls are nevertheless kind of clunky, and you'll suffer plenty of deaths as you mistimed jumps or inadvertently run too far and into a death trap. The gun combat possibly feels even worse, although I suspect that this is largely a product of the slowdown that is a constant factor in gunfights. Yes, the graphics were amazing for the Mega Drive, but they came at a price. Being a fairly sedate game without a huge focus on combat, the slowdown is rarely a massive factor, but on the few occasions it does affect the gameplay, it can be a significant frustration. Occasionally you'll encounter armed guards and you'll need to engage them in combat. Mostly this boils down to charging your gun to create a shield or two, then charging it for longer to use the super beam to destroy their shields, then finishing them off with a basic laser shot. And meanwhile your enemies will be trying to do the same to you. The combat encounters are heavily scripted, there's no real variance to them. The only way to win is to establish your shields and execute your charge attacks as quickly as possible. And honestly, the slowdown makes this really tough at times, especially since the margin for error is small. It also doesn't help that if your positioning is very slightly off, your charge attack will destroy your own shields instead of your enemies, so you need to take an occasional small step forward to avoid this happening, and the slowdown makes that a surprisingly tricky proposition. This bit here I found particularly brutal. Your placement and timing has to be absolutely precise, and that's tough when your inputs are being eaten by the slowdown. Ultimately, the combat, like I say, is a very small part of the game, so it's not a huge issue, but the slowdown will definitely kill you at least a few times, or maybe more. But yeah, this is not a game about combat, nor is it really all that much about platforming, although that is an element at times too. Mostly Another World reminds me more of adventure games of the era, games where you were presented with an obstacle and had to use logic or lateral thinking, or more often sheer trial and error to overcome them. Yes, this is ultimately quite a short game. A casual playthrough once you know where you're going will take maybe half an hour if you don't make too many mistakes, but first time around you will die over and over as you try to figure out exactly what is expected of you. So you could spend hours, days, weeks, or who knows how long trying to blunt force your way through the game. I personally had owned the game for at least a year before I managed to get through it, and even then I only made it to the end thanks to a guide published in a magazine. So failure and death will be your constant companions on this journey. And indeed, there's a good chance you will die in the first few seconds after you gain control of your character. Lester is abruptly teleported into a body of water, and unless you start swimming upwards almost immediately, you will be grabbed by a tentacled monstrosity and pulled downwards to an extremely early demise. It's easy enough to figure out what you need to do in this case, but not every solution will be so obvious. The next major hurdle, this giant black beast, is a bit more difficult to figure out, as you need to run all the way to the left, jump onto the vine to swing back to the right, and then keep running until you literally bump into an unexpected source of assistance. Again, this is not super challenging to figure out, there isn't really a whole lot else you can do, but you will die a lot, and things only get tougher and more esoteric from here. Fortunately, the game is broken up into very small segments, few of which will take you more than 3 or 4 minutes once you know what you're doing, so the frustration of repetition is minimized. The frustration of just having no idea what the game wants from you, however, can still be an issue. In truth, there aren't that many situations that are totally baffling, but if, as I was, you're a kid in the 90s with no internet, modest intelligence, relatively limited gaming experience, and no supplies of patience, it's possible to get truly hard stuck. I can't remember precisely where I got stuck back in the day. It might have been this bit where you need to actually not kill this guy, but instead let him reach up and press a button locking the doors, thus allowing you to enter the room above without getting instantly disintegrated by the guard. This bit where you need to disturb a bat-like creature so it flies into the tentacles of a nearby monstrosity was also something that definitely held me up back then, although it's a relatively logical bit of problem solving. And honestly, most of the game is pretty reasonable and fun to figure out. This whole section in the caverns is a nice bit of game design. You need to flood the whole place and escape from the torrent of water. It feels both tense and impactful in a way that games of that era rarely managed. And this puzzle, where you need to use the reflection to judge when the guard below is directly under the lamp, is a very cool bit of environmental design that most games back then simply weren't sophisticated enough to implement, certainly not on the Mega Drive at least. And it really is the environment and character of the game as a whole that sets Another World apart. Slowdown aside, the graphics are impressive for the Mega Drive, but it's the world they create that's most impressive. This is an alien place, and in your brief time within it you'll get compelling hints of the culture that exists within it. Clearly this is an advanced society you've stumbled across, and a conflicted one. You actually travel through the game with a companion of sorts, a fellow captor who befriends you near the beginning after you manage to free the two of you from your suspended cell. You can't really communicate with each other, but the wordless companionship that builds up between you is really rather nice, as he comes to your aid many times throughout the game. There's some truly evocative world building here, and I actually found myself wanting to know more about this strange new land and the people that call it home. There was actually a sequel of sorts, which as far as I know was only released on the Mega CD, but it was disowned by the creator of Another World and described as not representative of his vision. So I guess the ending of this game, in which a critically injured Lester is carried off into the sky by his companion towards an uncertain future, is where it's best left for now. Hey, look who did the sound and music! Or at least who was credited with doing the sound and music. It's Tommy Tallarico. His mother must be very proud. Another World has not aged well in some ways. These days, the average player would probably not resist the ability to just go online to get the solution to any problem that held them up for a few minutes. I know I wouldn't. And that would make the game painfully brief, almost insignificant. But the impact that Another World had on gaming in the early 90s was definitely not insignificant, and it looms large in my memory. And even today I really enjoyed revisiting its beautiful, evocative Otherworld. Well, thanks for watching. Do please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and let me know if there are any games, retro or otherwise, that you think I'd enjoy, or that you'd like to see me make a video about. I'm always looking for inspiration. Until next time though, get off my lawn.